The blood-red horizon split open the New Mexico sky like a wound, as Catherine Monroe stumbled barefoot across the parched earth, each step sending needles of pain through her blistered feet. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in Santa Fe had withered as quickly as her water supply. 3 days since the stagecoach robbery, 3 days of wandering through unforgiving terrain with nothing but the torn remains of her once fine traveling dress and the stubborn will to survive. The earth beneath her feet had long since shredded her delicate city shoes, forcing her to discard them miles back. Her mouth felt like cotton, her lips cracked and bleeding. The distant mountains wavered in the heat, mocking her with their unreachable beauty. She had been walking for so long that the concept of time had dissolved into meaningless stretches of suffering. When Catherine's knees finally buckled, sending her crashing into the dust, she didn't immediately rise. The temptation to surrender to exhaustion whispered seductively in her ear. "Just rest, close your eyes, the pain will end." But something made her lift her head one more time. That's when she saw him, a dark silhouette against the dying sun. A man on horseback, approaching steadily across the empty landscape. Friend or foe, she couldn't tell, but it hardly mattered now. Catherine tried to call out, but her parched throat produced nothing more than a raspy whisper. Owen Blackwood reined in his stallion, scanning the terrain with narrowed eyes. Cattle rustlers had been active in these parts, and as foreman of the Rockingham Ranch, he couldn't afford to lose any more of Mr. Miller's stock. The ranch was already struggling after 3 seasons of drought. His gaze settled on what appeared to be a bundle of rags in the distance, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a woman. "Whoa, thunder," he murmured, bringing his horse to a halt several yards from the collapsed figure. Bandits were known to use all manner of tricks, including injured women as bait. Owen rested his hand on the Colt revolver at his hip as he called out, "You there, are you in need of assistance?" When the only response was a weak movement of her hand, Owen dismounted cautiously, keeping his senses alert. As he approached, he saw that this was no trick. The woman's dress was torn and dirty, her hair matted with dust, and her feet, Lord Almighty, her feet were raw and bleeding, testament to a long journey without proper footwear. "Miss," he said, kneeling beside her. "Miss, can you hear me?" Catherine managed to lift her head, her blue eyes clouded with exhaustion but still defiant. "Water," she whispered. Owen quickly retrieved his canteen, gently lifting her head to help her drink. "Easy now, not too fast." She sipped desperately, water spilling down her chin as she tried to gulp it all at once. "Slowly," he cautioned, his voice firm but kind. "Too much at once will make you sick." When she had taken enough to wet her throat, Catherine found her voice. "Thank you." The words were barely audible. "What happened to you?" Owen asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Where did you come from?" "Stagecoach. To Santa Fe," she managed. "Robbers, 3 days ago." Owen surveyed the empty landscape with a frown. They were at least 20 miles from the main stagecoach route. This woman had been wandering in circles for days. "I'm Owen Blackwood, foreman at the Rockingham Ranch," he said. "Can you tell me your name?" "Catherine Monroe," she replied, her voice growing slightly stronger. "I was traveling to become a schoolteacher in Santa Fe." Owen nodded, his mind already calculating the situation. The sun would be down soon, and they were still hours from the ranch. This woman needed immediate care, not another long journey. "Miss Monroe, we need to get you somewhere safe before nightfall. Can you stand?" Catherine attempted to rise, but her legs betrayed her, buckling instantly. Owen caught her before she hit the ground again. The touch of his strong hands on her arms sent an unexpected jolt through her body, a reminder that she was alive, still human despite the ordeal. I don't think I can walk anymore," she admitted, shame coloring her voice. Catherine had always prided herself on her independence, ever since her parents' deaths had left her to fend for herself in Philadelphia. Owen studied her for a moment, taking in her exhausted state and injured feet. His decision was made quickly. "Walk with me," he said simply, his voice deep and steady. "I'll carry you if I must." The unexpected gentleness in those words brought tears to Catherine's eyes, the first moisture they'd held in days. Without waiting for her response, Owen scooped her up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, evidence of her days without food. "I have a line shack about an hour's ride from here," he explained, carrying her to his horse. "We can shelter there for the night, get you some food and tend to those feet." Catherine wanted to protest, to insist she could manage somehow, but her body had reached its limit. As Owen lifted her onto his horse, she could only nod gratefully. He mounted behind her, one strong arm securing her against his chest while the other held the reins. The solid warmth of him behind her was both foreign and comforting. Catherine couldn't remember the last time she had been this close to a man, certainly never one whose face was dusted with several days' worth of stubble, whose hands were calloused from hard labor, and who smelled of leather, horse, and the wild open country. As they rode, the sun continued its descent, painting the landscape in deepening shades of purple and gold. Catherine found herself drifting in and out of consciousness, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the security of Owen's arm around her waist lulling her into an exhausted half-sleep. Owen felt the woman's body grow heavier against him as she succumbed to exhaustion. He adjusted his hold, ensuring she wouldn't slip from the saddle. The responsibility of her safety weighed on him, yet there was something about her that stirred his admiration. To have survived alone for 3 days in this unforgiving terrain spoke of remarkable resilience. The line shack came into view just as the last light faded from the sky, a simple one-room structure built for cowboys working the distant sections of the ranch. Owen had stocked it with provisions just 2 days earlier, a fortunate coincidence that would now benefit his unexpected guest. "Miss Monroe," he said softly near her ear. "We're here." Catherine stirred, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings and the man whose arms held her securely. Then memory returned, along with a rush of gratitude that almost overwhelmed her. Owen dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. Her legs gave way immediately, but he was ready, catching her once again in his arms. Without comment, he carried her to the shack's door, somehow managing to open it while still holding her. The interior was sparse but clean: a small iron stove, a narrow bed with a straw mattress, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. Owen gently set Catherine on the bed. "Rest here while I see to my horse," he instructed. "Then we'll get you fed and those feet tended to." Catherine nodded, too weary to speak. As Owen stepped outside, she took in her surroundings more carefully. The shack was humble, yet it represented safety, the first she'd felt since the stagecoach robbery. She closed her eyes just for a moment. When she opened them again, Owen was moving quietly around the small space, having already started a fire in the stove. The aroma of coffee brewing brought her fully awake. "How long was I asleep?" she asked, her voice stronger than before. Owen turned, seeming almost surprised to hear her speak. "Not long. Just while I unsaddled Thunder and got him settled for the night." He poured water from a canteen into a basin and brought it to her side, along with a clean cloth. "I reckon you'd like to wash up a bit before eating." The simple kindness of the gesture brought tears to Catherine's eyes again. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "Owen," he corrected, setting the basin on a small stool beside the bed. "Out here, formalities don't much matter." He retreated to the stove, giving her privacy as she washed her face and hands, removing the worst of the dust and grime. The cool water revived her spirits considerably. Owen returned with a steaming mug of coffee and a plate of beans and salt pork he'd warmed on the stove. "It's not fancy fare," he apologized, "but it'll put strength back in you." Catherine accepted the food gratefully. "It looks wonderful." As she ate, Owen retrieved a wooden box from a shelf, a basic medical kit kept in all the line shacks. He knelt at her feet, his expression solemn as he examined the damage. "This will hurt some," he warned, dampening another cloth. "But these need cleaning before infection sets in." Catherine nodded, bracing herself. When the cloth touched her raw skin, she couldn't suppress a sharp intake of breath. Owen's hands paused. "Go ahead," she said through gritted teeth. "I can bear it." Something like respect flickered in his eyes before he returned to his task, working as gently as possible to clean the dirt and blood from her feet. Catherine focused on the man before her, using the distraction to manage the pain. Owen Blackwood was perhaps 30 years old, with a lean, muscular build that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor. His face was tanned and weathered, with crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his current serious expression indicated. His hair was dark brown, almost black, overdue for a trim and curling slightly at the collar of his faded blue shirt. His hands, though rough with calluses, moved with surprising gentleness as he tended to her injuries. "How did you come to be out here alone?" she asked, needing conversation to distract from the pain. Owen glanced up briefly. "Checking fences and looking for strays. Been gone from the main ranch for 3 days now." "No, I meant," Catherine hesitated. "How did you become a cowboy?" "You don't speak like the others I encountered on the journey west." A shadow passed over his face. "I wasn't always a cowboy, had some schooling back east, even taught for a spell in St. Louis." This revelation surprised her. "You were a teacher for 2 years." He applied a salve to her feet, his touch careful. "Then the war came. After that, well, I needed open spaces and simple work." Catherine understood immediately. She had seen that same haunted look in the eyes of veterans who returned to Philadelphia after the Civil War had ended 11 years ago. Some wounds never fully healed. "And you?" Owen asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What brings a city woman to these parts?" Catherine sighed, the memories of recent months washing over her. "After my parents died last year, there wasn't much left for me in Philadelphia. I saw an advertisement for a teaching position in Santa Fe. It promised respectable work and a fresh start. Traveling alone." His tone was neutral, but she detected a hint of concern. "I had little choice. My father's debts left me with barely enough for the journey itself." She gave a humorless laugh. "And now I've lost even that. The robbers took everything: my trunk, my savings, even the letter confirming my position." Owen finished bandaging her feet with strips of clean cloth, then sat back on his heels. "The nearest town is Silver Creek, about half a day's ride from here. There's a doctor there who can properly tend to you, and perhaps the sheriff can help with your situation." "I have no money to pay a doctor," Catherine admitted, embarrassed by her circumstances. "Don't worry about that now," Owen said, rising to his feet. "First, you need rest. We'll head to town tomorrow." He moved to the corner of the shack and began unrolling his bedroll on the floor. "I can't take your bed," Catherine protested. Owen shook his head firmly. "You're injured and exhausted. I've slept on harder ground than this floor many times." Too weary to argue further, Catherine relented. As Owen extinguished the lamp, leaving only the dim glow from the banked fire in the stove, she whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for saving my life today." There was a moment of silence before his deep voice replied, "Get some sleep, Miss Monroe." Catherine closed her eyes, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the night, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft shifting of the horse outside, and the steady breathing of the stranger who had shown her such unexpected kindness. For the first time in days, she felt something besides fear and desperation. She felt hope. Dawn broke with soft pink fingers of light filtering through the single window of the lined shack. Catherine awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the ache in her feet reminded her. She pushed herself up on her elbows to find Owen already awake, stoking the fire in the small stove. "Morning," he said, his voice gruff with sleep. "How are your feet feeling?" Catherine cautiously flexed her toes, wincing at the pain. "Better than yesterday, but still quite tender." Owen nodded, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "We'll need to change those bandages before we ride out." The reality of her situation came flooding back. She was stranded in the wilderness with no possessions, no money, and no immediate prospects. The teaching position in Santa Fe was likely lost to her now, with no way to prove her identity or her appointment. Owen must have read the distress on her face. "One step at a time, Miss Monroe," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. "First, we get to Silver Creek and see the doctor. Then we'll figure out the rest." His calm practicality steadied her. "You're right, of course." They shared a simple breakfast of hardtack and jerky. When it came time to change her bandages, Catherine was dismayed to see that her feet, while cleaner, were still swollen and raw in places. "You won't be walking on these anytime soon," Owen observed, applying more of the salve. "But they don't appear infected, which is a blessing." Once her feet were freshly bandaged, Owen helped her outside to tend to her personal needs, discreetly giving her privacy while remaining close enough to assist if needed. The morning air was cool, promising another scorching day ahead. "I need to check the horse and secure the shack," Owen explained. "Then we'll head out." Catherine watched him move efficiently around the small clearing, his actions those of a man accustomed to self-reliance. There was a quiet strength about him that she found reassuring. When it came time to mount the horse, Owen lifted her as if she weighed nothing, settling her in the saddle before mounting behind her. Once again, she found herself acutely aware of his physical presence, the solid chest at her back, the arms that encircled her to hold the reins, the gentle pressure of his thighs against hers. It was both unsettling and oddly comforting. They rode in silence for the first hour, the vastness of the landscape seeming to discourage trivial conversation. Catherine was struck by how different this country was from the crowded streets of Philadelphia, the endless sky, the rugged beauty of the distant mountains, the sheer emptiness of it all. "Have you been in New Mexico territory long?" she finally asked, needing to break the silence. "6 years at the Rockingham," Owen replied. "Before that, I drifted some after the war, Texas, Arizona territory, even California for a spell. You've seen much of the country then. More than most, I suppose." There was a pause before he added, "This land gets in your blood after a while." The openness of it, the freedom. Catherine tried to see it through his eyes, not as harsh and threatening, but as liberating. "I've only ever known city life," she admitted. "All this space is overwhelming. Takes some getting used to," he agreed. "But I couldn't go back to being hemmed in by buildings and people now." "And your family, are they nearby?" She felt him stiffen slightly behind her. "No family to speak of. Parents gone, no siblings. The ranch hands are the closest thing I've got." Catherine nodded, understanding loneliness all too well. "Mine are gone too. My mother passed when I was 16 and my father last year." "I'm sorry for your loss," Owen said, the simple words carrying genuine sympathy. "Thank you." She hesitated before adding, "It's strange how quickly life can change. A week ago I was on my way to a new beginning. Now I'm not sure what tomorrow will bring." "Life out here teaches you that plans don't mean much," Owen replied. "It's how you handle what comes at you that matters." His philosophy was so different from the ordered, predictable existence she had known, yet there was wisdom in it. Catherine fell silent, contemplating how quickly her own expectations had been upended. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became oppressive. Owen stopped occasionally to give his horse rest and to offer Catherine water. During one such break, sheltering under the sparse shade of a juniper tree, he studied her with a thoughtful expression. "If your teaching position in Santa Fe doesn't work out, Silver Creek might have need of a schoolteacher," he suggested. "Town's growing, lots of families moving in." The possibility hadn't occurred to her. "Do they have a school?" "They've been talking about building one for 2 years now. Last I heard, they were teaching the children in the back room of the church." Owen shrugged. "Might be worth asking about while we're there." Hope flickered within Catherine. "I will, thank you for the suggestion." They resumed their journey, the landscape gradually changing as they approached more settled areas. By midday, Catherine could see scattered homesteads in the distance, and eventually the outline of a small town took shape on the horizon. Silver Creek proved to be larger than Catherine had expected, several dozen buildings lining a main street with houses spreading outward. There was a general store, a saloon, a small church, and various other businesses that constituted the commercial heart of the community. Owen guided his horse directly to a modest building with a sign identifying it as the office of Dr. William Harris. He dismounted first, then lifted Catherine down carefully, mindful of her injured feet. "I can't walk," she reminded him, embarrassed by her helplessness. Without comment, Owen simply gathered her into his arms and carried her into the doctor's office. A bell jingled as they entered, and moments later a man in his 50s with spectacles and a neatly trimmed beard emerged from a back room. "Owen Blackwood," the doctor greeted him, eyebrows rising at the sight of the woman in his arms. "What have we here?" "Dr. Harris, this is Miss Catherine Monroe," Owen explained. "Found her yesterday about 20 miles out, barefoot and nearly done in." Stagecoach robbery left her stranded. The doctor's face grew serious. Bring her in here. He led them to an examination room where Owen gently set Catherine on a padded table. Dr. Harris turned to Owen. I'll take good care of her. Why don't you see to your other business in town? This may take some time. Owen hesitated, looking at Catherine. Will you be all right? She nodded, touched by his concern. Yes, thank you, I'll be fine. After Owen left, Dr. Harris carefully removed the bandages from Catherine's feet, his expression growing grave as he examined the damage. You're fortunate, mister. Blackwood found you when he did, he commented. Another day out there, and these might have become dangerously infected. Will I be able to walk again soon? Catherine asked anxiously. With proper care, yes, but it will take time, the doctor replied, cleaning her wounds with a solution that stung fiercely. You'll need to stay off these feet as much as possible for at least a week, preferably 2. Catherine's heart sank. She had no place to stay, no money, and no prospects. I'm afraid I have no way to pay you, doctor. The robbers took everything I had. Dr. Harris paused in his ministrations. Don't concern yourself with that now, we'll sort it out later. He patted her hand reassuringly. Silver Creek takes care of its own and those in need. You're very kind, Catherine said, blinking back tears of relief. The doctor continued working, applying a medicinal ointment to her feet and wrapping them in clean bandages. These will need changing daily, and you'll need proper rest. He studied her thoughtfully. Do you have somewhere to stay in town? No, she admitted. I know no one here except Mr. Blackwood, and we only met yesterday. Dr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. There's a boarding house run by Mrs. Sullivan. She sometimes takes in those who need assistance. I can speak with her. By the time Owen returned, Catherine's feet had been properly treated, and the doctor had given her a tonic for pain and exhaustion. Owen entered the examination room with a bundle under his arm. Stopped by the general store, he explained, placing the package beside her. Thought you might need some essentials. Curious, Catherine opened the bundle to find a simple calico dress, undergarments, a hairbrush, and other basic necessities. The thoughtfulness of the gesture left her momentarily speechless. I cannot accept these, she finally managed. You've already done so much, and I have no way to repay you. Owen's expression remained impassive. You need clothes, Miss Monroe. It's a practical matter, nothing more. Dr. Harris cleared his throat. I was just telling Miss Monroe that Mrs. Sullivan at the boarding house might be able to accommodate her while she recovers. Owen nodded. I thought of that too. Already spoke with Mrs. Sullivan. She has a room available and is willing to take Miss Monroe in until she's back on her feet. Catherine looked between the two men, overwhelmed by their kindness. I don't know what to say. No need to say anything, Owen replied gruffly. I also stopped by the sheriff's office, told him about the stagecoach robbery. He's sending wires to Santa Fe about your teaching position. Thank you, Catherine whispered, feeling tears threatening again. She had cried more in the past day than in the entire year following her father's death. Well, Dr. Harris said briskly, I think we should get Miss Monroe settled at Mrs. Sullivan's. She needs rest and regular meals to regain her strength. Owen nodded in agreement. I can take her there now. Once again, Catherine found herself being carried in Owen's strong arms, this time through the streets of Silver Creek. She was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople, but Owen seemed oblivious to the attention. Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house was a 2-story building with a wide porch and neatly tended flower beds. The proprietress herself, a plump, gray-haired woman with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, met them at the door. So this is the young lady you mentioned, she said, assessing Catherine with a quick but thorough glance. Bring her right in, Mr. Blackwood. I've prepared the room at the end of the hall downstairs, so she won't have to manage stairs. The room was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Owen set Catherine down on the bed with care. Mrs. Sullivan has agreed to let you stay until you're recovered, he explained, and to provide meals. But the cost, Catherine began to protest. Mrs. Sullivan waved a dismissive hand. We'll sort that out later, dear. For now, you need rest and good food. Owen shifted awkwardly. I need to get back to the ranch, report to Mr. Miller. I've been gone longer than expected. Catherine felt an unexpected pang at the thought of his departure. This man who had been a stranger just yesterday had become her lifeline, her only connection in this unfamiliar place. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile. "You've done more than enough. I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," he replied, his expression unreadable. "The sheriff knows where to find you if he learns anything about your situation, Mrs. Sullivan accompanied Owen to the door, leaving Catherine alone with her thoughts. Through the window, she watched him mount his horse and ride away, his tall figure straight and confident in the saddle. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize how much she had come to rely on his steadying presence in the short time they had known each other. With a sigh, Catherine surveyed her new surroundings. The room was modest but clean, the bed comfortable after her ordeal. On the washstand, she spotted the bundle Owen had purchased for her. Reaching for it, she examined the contents more carefully. The dress was simple but well made, the fabric sturdy and practical. There was also a small bottle of rose-scented water, a luxury she hadn't expected. The thoughtfulness of these items, chosen with obvious care for her comfort, brought a lump to her throat. Owen Blackwood was not a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes about his character. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Sullivan entered carrying a tray with a bowl of soup and a slice of fresh bread. "You need to eat, dear," she said, placing the tray on Catherine's lap. "Can't recover your strength on an empty stomach." The soup was rich with vegetables and chunks of beef, far more appetizing than anything Catherine had eaten in weeks. As she ate, Mrs. Sullivan bustled about the room, arranging Catherine's few new possessions and filling a pitcher with fresh water. "Mr. Blackwood told me a little of your situation," the older woman said. "Terrible business, those stagecoach robberies. You're lucky to be alive." "Yes," Catherine agreed, "if Mr. Blackwood hadn't found me when he did." Mrs. Sullivan nodded knowingly. "He's a good man, that one. Keeps to himself mostly, but always ready to help when needed." She paused, studying Catherine. "He seemed quite concerned about you." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "He's been very kind." Was all Mrs. Sullivan said, but her expression was speculative. "Well, you finish that soup, then get some rest. Doctor's orders. We can talk more tomorrow." Left alone again, Catherine finished her meal, then leaned back against the pillows. Exhaustion washed over her in waves, but her mind was too full for sleep. In just 2 days, her life had been completely upended, first by disaster, then by unexpected kindness. What would tomorrow bring? With that question still circling in her mind, she finally drifted into a deep, healing sleep. The following week passed in a blur of rest and recovery for Catherine. Her feet slowly began to heal under Dr. Harris's careful attention, and Mrs. Sullivan's hearty meals helped restore her strength. The boarding house proprietress proved to be a font of information about Silver Creek and its inhabitants, keeping Catherine entertained with stories during her confinement. On the third day, Sheriff Tanner visited with news from Santa Fe. The stagecoach company had confirmed the robbery, but Catherine's belongings had not been recovered. More concerning was the news about her teaching position. "I'm afraid they've already filled the post, Miss Monroe," the sheriff explained gently. "When you didn't arrive as scheduled and sent no word, they assumed you'd changed your mind." Catherine had been bracing herself for this possibility, but the confirmation still stung. "I understand. Thank you for inquiring on my behalf." After the sheriff left, Catherine sat by the window, watching the activity on Silver Creek's Main Street. The setback was significant, but she refused to surrender to despair. She had survived worse. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Sullivan entered with a thoughtful expression. "I've been speaking with Reverend Caldwell," she announced. "He's quite interested in meeting you, says the town has been trying to establish a proper school for over a year now." Hope flickered within Catherine. "Mr. Blackwood mentioned something similar. Did he now, Mrs. Sullivan's eyes twinkled. "Well, the Reverend will be stopping by tomorrow. Might be an opportunity for you, dear." The next day, Reverend Caldwell, a kindly man in his 60s with a shock of white hair, visited Catherine. Their conversation about education and her qualifications extended through the afternoon, ending with an unexpected proposal. "Miss Monroe, Our town council has been setting aside funds for a school and teacher's salary for some time now, he explained. We have 27 children of school age with no formal education. If you're interested, I believe we could offer you the position. Catherine could hardly believe her luck. I would be honored, Reverend, but the school building is still in the planning stages, he admitted. For now, classes would be held in the church, but the town has purchased land and construction could begin before winter. And housing for the teacher. There's a small cottage behind the church that could be made suitable. It needs some work, but it would be yours as part of your compensation. The offer was better than Catherine had dared hope for. I accept with gratitude, Reverend. When would you want me to start? Once you're fully recovered, of course, perhaps in 2 weeks' time. That would give us opportunity to prepare the space and notify families. After the Reverend departed, Catherine sat in stunned silence. In just over a week, she had lost everything, nearly died, and now found herself with a new position and the promise of a home. The unpredictability of life that Owen had spoken of was proving true, for better and worse. Owen. The thought of him came unbidden, as it had frequently during the past week. She wondered if he had returned to town, if he had thought to check on her welfare. The fact that he hadn't visited left her with an inexplicable sense of disappointment, as if summoned by her thoughts. Mrs. Sullivan knocked and entered with news. You have another visitor, dear. Mr. Blackwood is here. Catherine's heart quickened. Please send him in. When Owen entered, she was struck by the transformation in his appearance. Gone was the trail-worn cowboy who had rescued her. In his place stood a man freshly bathed and shaved, wearing a clean shirt and his best denims. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. Miss Monroe, he greeted her, his voice carrying the same deep timbre she remembered. You're looking much improved, Mr. Blackwood, she replied, suddenly conscious of her own appearance in the simple calico dress he had purchased. It's good to see you. Please sit down. He took the chair beside her bed, his large frame making the small furniture appear even more diminutive. How are your feet healing? Well, according to Dr. Harris, I've even taken a few steps with Mrs. Sullivan's assistance. Catherine smiled. I understand I have you to thank for suggesting the teaching position here in Silver Creek. Owen shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Just mention the possibility. Reverend Caldwell did the rest. Nevertheless, I'm grateful. She studied him curiously. What brings you to town today? Supply run for the ranch, he replied, then added more hesitantly, and wanted to check on your welfare. The simple admission warmed her. That's very kind of you. An awkward silence fell between them. Catherine noticed Owen's hands, still fidgeting with his hat, and the way his eyes occasionally glanced at her before darting away. I brought something for you, he finally said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small paper-wrapped package and handed it to her. Curious, Catherine unwrapped it to find a beautiful silver hairpin with a small turquoise stone. Oh, she breathed, running her finger over the delicate piece. It's lovely. Not much, but thought you might like something. Owen trailed off, clearly embarrassed. Anyway, figured you lost all your personal items in the robbery. Catherine was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you, I'll treasure it. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. In that moment, Catherine realized that her feelings toward this quiet, honorable man had grown beyond simple gratitude. Owen cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Mrs. Sullivan says you'll be teaching here. Yes, starting in 2 weeks, Catherine confirmed. There's a cottage behind the church that will serve as my residence once it's prepared. Good, that's good. Owen nodded, seeming genuinely pleased. Silver Creek needs a proper school. Children here deserve education. I understand you were once a teacher yourself, Catherine said softly. A shadow passed over his face. Long time ago, different life. Catherine sensed his reluctance to discuss the past and changed the subject. Will you be returning to town soon? Perhaps when I'm able to walk properly, you might show me around Silver Creek. The invitation clearly surprised him. Yes, I'd be glad to. His expression softened. I'm due back in town next Saturday for the ranch's banking business. Then perhaps we could meet then. I should be much more mobile by that time. I'd like that, Owen replied, his usually serious face brightening with a smile that transformed his features, revealing a handsome man beneath the weathered exterior. They talked for another hour, the initial awkwardness giving way to easier conversation. Owen told her about the Rocking M Ranch, his work as foreman, and the challenges of raising cattle in the drought-prone territory. Catherine shared stories of her life in Philadelphia and her journey west. When Owen finally rose to leave, explaining he needed to complete his errands before returning to the ranch, Catherine felt an unexpected pang of regret. "Thank you for visiting," she said sincerely. "And for the beautiful hairpin." Owen nodded, settling his hat on his head. "Until Saturday then, Miss Monroe." "Catherine," she corrected him. "After all we've been through, I think you can use my given name." A slow smile spread across his face. "Catherine," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice, "and I'm Owen to my friends." After he left, Catherine held the silver hairpin, running her fingers over its smooth surface. In just over a week, Owen Blackwood had gone from stranger to rescuer to. What exactly? Friend, certainly, but the flutter in her chest when he smiled suggested the potential for something more. The thought both excited and terrified her. She had come west seeking independence and a new beginning, not romantic entanglement. Yet there was something about Owen, his quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, his understated intelligence that drew her to him in a way she'd never experienced before. Catherine placed the hairpin carefully on her bedside table. Whatever might develop between them would have to unfold naturally, in its own time. For now, she had her recovery to focus on and a new position to prepare for. But she found herself looking forward to Saturday with an anticipation that had little to do with seeing Silver Creek and everything to do with the man who would be showing it to her. Saturday dawned clear and mild, a perfect day for Catherine's first real outing since her ordeal. Dr. Harris had examined her feet the previous day and pronounced her fit for limited walking, as long as she wore the soft moccasins Mrs. Sullivan had procured for her. Catherine dressed with special care in her calico dress, now freshly laundered. She arranged her hair as best she could, securing it with Owen's silver hairpin. The effect was modest but neat, the best she could manage with her limited resources. Mrs. Sullivan knocked and entered, her eyes twinkling as she took in Catherine's preparations. "My, don't you look lovely this morning. Expecting company, are we?" Catherine blushed. "Mr. Blackwood offered to show me around town today." "Did he now?" The older woman smiled knowingly. "Well, he's already here, waiting in the parlor." Arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, looking quite presentable himself. Catherine's heart quickened. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. I'll join him directly." Walking was still uncomfortable, but Catherine managed to make her way to the parlor without assistance, determined not to appear helpless. Owen stood as she entered, his expression warming at the sight of her. "Good morning," she greeted him. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting." "Not at all," he replied, his eyes taking in her appearance. "You look well. Those feet must be healing nicely." "Doctor Harris says I'm making excellent progress, though I shouldn't overdo it today." Owen nodded seriously. "We'll take it slow. I brought the wagon rather than horses, thought it might be easier for you." The consideration touched her. "Thank you, that was thoughtful." As they left the boarding house, Catherine was struck again by Owen's transformed appearance. He wore a clean blue shirt, pressed trousers, and a black vest. His hair was neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. The effect was quite handsome, though she found she rather missed the slight stubble that had shadowed his jaw when they first met. The wagon waiting outside was not the utilitarian ranch vehicle she had expected, but a smaller buggy with a cushioned seat. Owen helped her up carefully, his strong hands gentle at her waist. "This is very nice," Catherine commented as he joined her on the seat. "Is it yours?" "Borrowed it from Mr. Miller," Owen admitted. "Thought you'd be more comfortable than in the supply wagon." As they set off down the main street, Catherine became acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. Silver Creek was small enough that news traveled fast, and her arrival and circumstances had clearly become common knowledge. "I feel like I'm on display," she murmured. Owen glanced at her. "Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone's business, they're just curious about the new school teacher." Is that how they see me? Not as the woman you found half dead in the desert, his expression softened. Give them time. Soon enough you'll just be Miss Monroe, the school teacher who's too strict with arithmetic and too lenient with spelling. The comment surprised a laugh from her. Speaking from experience, Mr. Blackwood, maybe, he admitted with a rare smile, though I was stricter with spelling than arithmetic. The image of Owen as a schoolteacher was still difficult for Catherine to reconcile with the capable cowboy who had rescued her. I wish I could have seen you in a classroom. A shadow crossed his face. That was a different man in a different time. Catherine sensed again the wounds he carried from the war, though he never spoke of them directly. Well, I'm grateful to know the man you are now, she said softly. Their eyes met briefly before Owen turned his attention back to guiding the horse. Let me show you the town properly, he suggested, clearly wanting to change the subject. It's not much compared to Philadelphia, but it's growing. The tour of Silver Creek was more extensive than Catherine had anticipated. Beyond the main street she had glimpsed from her window, there were residential areas, small farms on the outskirts, and various businesses tucked away on side streets. Owen seemed to know everyone, greeting each person by name and introducing Catherine as Miss Monroe, our new schoolteacher. The pride in his voice when he said those words warmed her heart. It was clear that despite his solitary nature, Owen was respected and well-liked in the community. They stopped at the church, where Reverend Caldwell showed Catherine the room that would serve as her classroom until the school was built. They also visited the small cottage behind the church that would become her home. The cottage was more primitive than Catherine had expected, just 2 rooms with a small lean-to kitchen, currently filled with church storage. But it had good bones, with a sturdy roof and plank floors. It needs work, Reverend Caldwell acknowledged, but it will be comfortable once it's properly prepared. The ladies of the church auxiliary have volunteered to help make it suitable. It's perfect, Catherine assured him, already envisioning how she could arrange the space. I'm grateful for the opportunity. After leaving the church, Owen suggested lunch at the hotel dining room, the closest thing Silver Creek had to a restaurant. Catherine accepted, though she was beginning to tire, her feet protesting the morning's activities. The hotel dining room was simply furnished but clean, with white cloths on the tables and actual china plates. Several diners looked up with interest as Owen escorted Catherine to a table near the window. More curious onlookers, Catherine observed quietly. More like surprised ones, Owen replied with a wry smile. I don't often dine in town and never with a lady. Catherine found herself pleased by this information, though she tried not to show it. Well, I appreciate the exception, especially as I'm not much of a lady at present, with only one dress to my name. Owen's expression grew serious. You're every inch a lady, Catherine. Circumstances don't change who a person is. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, touched her deeply. Thank you, Owen. They ordered a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread. As they ate, Catherine found herself increasingly curious about this man who revealed so little of himself. Tell me about your life before the Rockingham, she prompted. You mentioned teaching in St. Louis, but where did you grow up? Owen hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no harm in sharing. Ohio, small town called Riverton. My father was the local doctor, wanted me to follow in his footsteps. But I preferred books to medicine, so I went to college instead, studied literature and history. And became a teacher, Catherine finished. Did you enjoy it? I did, he admitted. There's something satisfying about opening young minds to new ideas. A faint smile touched his lips. But then the war came and everything changed. Catherine waited, not wanting to press but hoping he would continue. Owen stared out the window for a long moment. Joined the Union Army in '62. Saw things no man should see, did things I. He trailed off, then shook his head. After it ended, I couldn't go back to teaching. Couldn't be around all that innocence when I'd lost my own. So I headed west, looking for open spaces where a man could breathe. The quiet confession revealed more about Owen than anything he'd said before. Catherine reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. Thank you for telling me, he nodded, seemingly embarrassed by the moment of openness. What about you? What led you to teaching? Catherine welcomed the change of subject. My mother was a teacher before she married. She educated me at home until I was 12, then I attended a ladies' seminary in Philadelphia. After she died, I helped support my father by giving piano lessons and tutoring. When he passed last year, teaching seemed the natural path to independence. You've known your share of hardship too, Owen observed. Different from yours, Catherine acknowledged. But yes, though I've also been fortunate in many ways. As they finished their meal, Catherine noticed Owen glancing at her feet. You're in pain, he stated, not a question but an observation. She started to deny it, then sighed. A little. Dr. Harris warned me not to overdo it. Then we should get you back to Mrs. Sullivan's. Owen signaled for the check, paid it despite Catherine's protest, and helped her to her feet. Outside, he surprised her by saying, "Put your arm around my shoulders." "I can walk," she insisted. "I know you can," he replied patiently, "but there's no need to suffer unnecessarily." Recognizing the wisdom in his words, Catherine relented, allowing him to support her as they made their way to the buggy. The contact was both uncomfortable and exhilarating. Uncomfortable, because she wasn't accustomed to such physical proximity with a man, exhilarating because that man was Owen. Once they were settled in the buggy, Owen turned to her with an apologetic expression. "I've pushed you too hard today, should have kept the outing shorter." "Nonsense," Catherine countered. "I've enjoyed every minute. Besides, I needed to see the church and the cottage to prepare for my new position." Owen studied her for a moment. "You're not what I expected, Catherine Monroe." "Oh, and what did you expect?" "When I found you in the desert, half dead and barely able to speak, I thought you were just another Eastern woman unprepared for the realities of the West." His expression softened. "But you're stronger than you look, resilient." The compliment warmed her. "I could say the same about you. When we met, I thought you were just a rough cowboy. I never expected to find a former teacher with a love of literature." A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Appearances can be deceiving." "Indeed they can," Catherine agreed. "I'm glad we've had the chance to look beyond them." As Owen guided the buggy back toward Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house, Catherine felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Despite the pain in her feet and the uncertainty of her situation, there was something about being in Owen's company that made her feel safe, respected, and most surprisingly understood. When they arrived at the boarding house, Owen helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The contact sent a flutter through Catherine's stomach that had nothing to do with pain or exhaustion. "Thank you for today," she said, looking up at him. "I enjoyed seeing Silver Creek through your eyes." "The pleasure was mine," he replied, his voice lower than usual. I'll be back in town next Saturday. Perhaps we could meet again, if you're feeling up to it." "I'd like that very much," Catherine answered, her heart quickening at the prospect. Owen seemed about to say something more, then thought better of it. "Until next Saturday, then." As Catherine watched him drive away, she was struck by the strange turn her life had taken. 2 weeks ago, she had been near death, lost and alone in an unforgiving landscape. Now she had a new position, a community beginning to accept her, and the promise of— what exactly? Friendship with Owen, certainly. But the way her pulse raced when he was near suggested the potential for something deeper. With a sigh that was part weariness and part anticipation, Catherine made her way into the boarding house, already counting the days until next Saturday. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity for Catherine. Her feet continued to heal, allowing her to move about with increasing ease, though Dr. Harris still cautioned against long walks. The community of Silver Creek embraced her with unexpected warmth, particularly after Reverend Caldwell announced her appointment as teacher during Sunday services. The ladies of the church auxiliary, led by Mrs. Campbell, the blacksmith's wife, took on the task of preparing the cottage for Catherine's occupancy. They cleaned, repaired, painted, and even furnished the small dwelling with donated items: a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small bookshelf, and various household necessities. "It's not much," Mrs. Campbell apologized as she showed Catherine the transformed space, "but it's clean and sound." "It's perfect," Catherine assured her, genuinely moved by the community's generosity. "I can't thank you all enough." Preparations for the school proceeded as well. The church room was cleaned and arranged with benches and tables borrowed from various sources. Reverend Caldwell provided a blackboard, and notices were sent to all families with school-age children, announcing classes would begin the following Monday. Throughout these busy days, Catherine found her thoughts often turning to Owen. True to his word, he had returned to Silver Creek the next Saturday, and they had spent another pleasant afternoon together, this time visiting the site where the new schoolhouse would eventually be built. Their third meeting had been even more enjoyable, a picnic by Silver Creek itself, the small river that gave the town its name. Owen had borrowed the buggy again, driving Catherine to a peaceful spot beneath cottonwood trees where they shared a simple meal of fried chicken, bread, and apple pie prepared by Mrs. Sullivan. It was during this picnic that Catherine realized her feelings for Owen had grown beyond friendship. There had been a moment, just a brief moment, when their hands had touched as they both reached for the same piece of chicken. The contact had sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with surprise and everything to do with attraction. Owen had felt it too, she was certain of it. His eyes had met hers, and something unspoken had passed between them before he'd cleared his throat and changed the subject to safer topics. Now, as Catherine prepared to move into her cottage the day before classes were to begin, she found herself both excited about her new beginning and anxious about what it might mean for her developing relationship with Owen. The Rockingham Ranch was 10 miles from town, making casual visits difficult. Would their Saturday meetings continue once she was established as the town's teacher? Mrs. Sullivan interrupted these thoughts, entering Catherine's room with a bundle in her arms. "A delivery for you, dear." Just arrived from Denver. Curious, Catherine unwrapped the package to find 2 dresses, one of deep blue calico suitable for teaching, the other a more formal garment of green wool with modest lace trim. There were also undergarments, stockings, a shawl, and a pair of sturdy leather shoes that looked to be exactly her size. "Who sent these?" she asked, astonished. Mrs. Sullivan handed her a note. "Came with this." The note was brief, written in a strong, masculine hand, for Miss Catherine Monroe to welcome her as Silver Creek's new teacher. "With respect, O. Blackwood." Catherine stared at the note, then at the clothing. The expense must have been considerable, certainly more than a ranch foreman could easily afford. "Well," Mrs. Sullivan said with a knowing smile, "it seems Mr. Blackwood wants to ensure our new teacher makes a good impression." "It's too much," Catherine murmured. "I can't accept such an extravagant gift." "Nonsense," the older woman replied firmly. "The man clearly respects you and understands your situation. Besides, a teacher needs proper attire." Catherine ran her fingers over the fine wool of the green dress. It had been so long since she'd owned anything new, let alone something so lovely. "I'll need to thank him properly. I believe he mentioned stopping by tomorrow to help you move into the cottage," Mrs. Sullivan said casually, though her eyes twinkled with matchmaking interest. The news both pleased and flustered Catherine. "Did he? He didn't mention it when we last spoke. Perhaps he wanted to surprise you." Mrs. Sullivan headed for the door. "You should try on the blue dress. Make sure it fits properly for your first day of teaching." Left alone, Catherine held the dresses against herself, admiring their quality and appropriate styling. Owen had chosen well, or perhaps had sought female assistance with the selections. Either way, the thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. The blue dress fit as if made for her, needing only minor adjustments to the hem. Catherine stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. With her hair neatly arranged, Owen's silver hairpin holding her twist in place, and the becoming blue dress emphasizing her eyes, she looked every inch the respectable schoolteacher. The following morning, Catherine packed her few belongings, ready to move into the cottage. True to Mrs. Sullivan's word, Owen arrived shortly after breakfast, driving the now familiar buggy. "Good morning," he greeted her, removing his hat as he entered the boarding house. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her in the new blue dress. "You look very well, Miss Monroe." "Thanks to your generosity," Catherine replied, meeting his gaze directly. "The dresses are beautiful, Owen, but far too expensive a gift for me to accept." Owen's expression grew serious. You needed proper clothing for your position. I was in a position to help." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Please, Catherine, allow me to do this small thing for you." There was something in his voice, a quiet earnestness that made refusal impossible. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll treasure them." A smile transformed his features. "Good. Now, are you ready to move into your new home?" The cottage, when they arrived, had been further transformed. Fresh wildflowers in a jar graced the table, the windows gleamed, and a small fire had been lit in the stove to take the morning chill from the air. Mrs. Campbell said she'd come by early to prepare things, Owen explained, carrying Catherine's trunk into the bedroom. "The ladies of the church have stocked your pantry as well." Catherine walked through the small space, touched by the community's welcome. "Everyone has been so kind." "They're good people," Owen agreed, "and they're excited to have a proper teacher for their children." After arranging her belongings, they sat at the small table where Owen had brought in a basket from the buggy. "Mrs. Sullivan packed us some lunch," he explained. "Thought you might be hungry after the move." As they shared the simple meal, Catherine found herself studying Owen. There was an ease between them now that hadn't existed during their earlier meetings. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Owen asked as they finished eating. "First day with the children." "A little," Catherine admitted. "I've taught before, but never a room with multiple ages and grades." "You'll do fine," he assured her. "Just remember that half of teaching is confidence. If you believe you can reach them, you will." The advice reminded Catherine again of Owen's past. "You miss it sometimes, don't you? Teaching." His expression grew distant. "Parts of it. The moment when a child first grasps a difficult concept. The quiet at the end of the day when the classroom is empty but still echoes with the day's learning." He shook his head. "But that was another life." "It doesn't have to be," Catherine said gently. "The past shapes us, Owen, but it doesn't have to define us forever." Their eyes met across the table, and Catherine felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Owen seemed about to reply when a knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was Reverend Caldwell, come to deliver some final school supplies and discuss last-minute arrangements for the following day. By the time they had finished, the afternoon was waning and Owen needed to return to the ranch. "Will I see you next Saturday?" Catherine asked as they stood at her door. Owen hesitated. "I may not be able to come to town next week. Mr. Miller needs me to accompany a cattle drive to the railhead. I'll be gone for about 10 days. Disappointment washed over Catherine, stronger than she had expected. "Oh, well, of course, your work must come first. But I'll come see you as soon as I return," Owen promised, his expression earnest. "And perhaps you could write to me while I'm gone. I could leave letters at the ranch for you and someone could bring them to town." The request surprised and pleased her. "I'd like that." They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Owen reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Good luck tomorrow, Catherine. You're going to be a fine teacher for Silver Creek." "Thank you, Owen, for everything." He nodded, released her hand reluctantly, and turned to leave. Catherine watched him go, already anticipating the emptiness his absence would create in her new life. But as she turned back to her cottage, her home, she reminded herself that she had achieved what she had set out to do when leaving Philadelphia. She had independence, meaningful work, and a community that valued her contributions. If there was also the possibility of something more with Owen Blackwood, well, that was an unexpected blessing she hadn't dared hope for. With renewed determination, Catherine began final preparations for her first day of teaching, pushing thoughts of Owen to a special corner of her heart where they could be treasured, but not distract from the task ahead. Catherine's first day as Silver Creek's teacher proved both challenging and rewarding. 23 children of varying ages and abilities filled the church room, their faces a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and in some cases, stubborn resistance. By day's end, Catherine was exhausted but satisfied. She had established rules, assessed basic skill levels, and even managed to engage the most reluctant learners. The days quickly fell into a pattern. Mornings began early with preparation of lessons, followed by school hours from 8 until 3. Afternoons were spent grading assignments, providing extra help to struggling students and planning the next day's work. Evenings were her own, usually spent reading by lamplight or writing in her journal, and writing to Owen. True to his word, he had left letters for her before departing on the cattle drive. These were delivered by young Jimmy Watson, a ranch hand who rode into town every few days with messages and mail. Owen's letters were like the man himself, straightforward, thoughtful, and occasionally revealing glimpses of deeper feelings. He described the cattle drive, the men he worked with, the changing landscape as they moved northward. But he also shared memories of his teaching days, books he had read and loved, and his hopes for Silver Creek's future. Catherine replied with equal openness, telling him about her students, the challenges of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously, and the small triumphs that made the effort worthwhile. She also wrote of her growing attachment to Silver Creek, the friendships she was forming with townspeople, and her gradual adaptation to Western life. What neither of them wrote explicitly, but what shimmered beneath the surface of their correspondence, was the deepening connection between them, a connection that transcended friendship and hinted at possibilities neither was quite ready to name. The 10 days of Owen's absence stretched to 12, then 14. Catherine tried not to worry, reminding herself that cattle drives were unpredictable endeavors, subject to weather, trail conditions, and the temperament of the herd. On the 16th day, as Catherine was dismissing her students, she looked up to find Owen standing in the doorway of the classroom, his tall figure silhouetted against the afternoon light. He looked trail-worn and tired, but his eyes brightened when they met hers. "Mr. Blackwood." She exclaimed, unable to hide her delight. "Children, you remember Mr. Blackwood from the Rockingham Ranch." The students greeted him with varying degrees of enthusiasm before gathering their books and filing out. Catherine waited until the last child had departed before approaching Owen. "You're back," she said simply, suddenly shy in his presence despite their correspondence. "Just rode in," he confirmed. "Wanted to see you before I even went to the hotel to clean up." The admission pleased her immensely. "I'm glad I've missed our conversations." "Your letters helped," Owen said, his voice low, "made the trail seem less lonely." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "I enjoyed writing them and receiving yours." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, both aware of how much had changed between them in their weeks apart. It was as if their letters had allowed them to know each other in ways that face-to-face meetings had not. "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" Owen asked suddenly. "At the hotel, after I've had a chance to make myself presentable." "I'd like that very much," Catherine replied, her heart quickening. Owen's smile transformed his tired face. 7 o'clock, 7 it is." After he left, Catherine hurried home to prepare, her mind racing with anticipation. She chose the green wool dress Owen had given her, arranging her hair carefully and securing it with his silver hairpin. The woman who looked back at her from the small mirror seemed both familiar and strange, her eyes brighter, her cheeks flushed with excitement. The hotel dining room was quiet that evening, with only a few other diners. Owen was waiting when Catherine arrived, looking markedly different from the trail-dusty cowboy who had appeared in her classroom. Freshly bathed and shaved, dressed in clean clothes, he cut an impressive figure that drew appreciative glances from the hotel waitress. "You look beautiful," he said simply as Catherine joined him. "Thank you," she replied, noting how the green dress seemed to please him. "You clean up rather well yourself." Dinner was a leisurely affair, the food better than Catherine remembered from their previous visit. Perhaps it was the company that improved the taste, or perhaps it was the candle the waitress had discreetly placed on their table, casting a warm glow over their meal. They talked easily, filling in the gaps their letters had left. Owen described the successful completion of the cattle drive, while Catherine shared amusing anecdotes about her students. As the evening progressed, however, their conversation turned more personal. "I've been thinking about what you said before I left," Owen admitted as they lingered over coffee. "About the past shaping us but not defining us forever." Catherine nodded encouragingly, sensing this was difficult territory for him. "For years after the war, I couldn't see beyond what I'd experienced, the violence, the loss, the senselessness of it all. His voice grew quieter. Couldn't imagine finding joy in teaching again or in much of anything. And now, Catherine prompted gently. Owen's eyes met hers, their expression more open than she had ever seen. Now I'm beginning to remember there's more to life than just surviving it. There's building something worthwhile. Being part of a community. He hesitated, then added, caring for someone. The implication in his words made Catherine's heart race. Those sound like worthy aims, she managed to say. I think so too, Owen agreed, his gaze steady on hers. Catherine, I'm not a man given to flowery speeches or grand gestures, but these past weeks, writing to you, thinking about you, they've meant a great deal to me. And to me, she replied softly, more than I expected when you found me in the desert. Owen reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I'm glad I found you that day, not just because I could help you, but because meeting you has changed something in me, awakened parts I thought were dead. The simple eloquence of his words moved Catherine deeply. Owen, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know this is sudden, I just wanted you to know how I feel. Catherine turned her hand in his, intertwining their fingers. It doesn't feel sudden to me, not really. Sometimes life brings people together in unexpected ways at exactly the right moment. Owen's expression softened with hope. Does that mean you might consider? That is, would you allow me to court you properly, with the intention of? He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. With the intention of seeing where this leads us, Catherine finished for him, her smile gentle. Yes, Owen, I'd like that very much. The relief and joy that crossed his face made him look years younger. Thank you, he said simply. As Owen walked Catherine home that evening, they moved at a leisurely pace, reluctant for the night to end. The stars above Silver Creek seemed unusually bright, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. At her door, Owen hesitated, clearly unsure of the proper protocol. Catherine solved his dilemma by rising on tiptoe and placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. Good night, Owen, she whispered. I'm glad you're back safely. His hand came up to touch the spot her lips had brushed, his expression one of wonder. Good night, Catherine, I'll see you soon. As she watched him walk away, Catherine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had led her to this moment had been circuitous and often painful, but standing on the threshold of her small cottage, watching Owen Blackwood disappear into the night, she couldn't imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. With a contented sigh, she entered her home, already looking forward to the next chapter of their story together. The autumn weeks passed in a golden haze for Catherine and Owen. True to his word, Owen courted her with respectful attentiveness, visiting whenever his duties at the ranch permitted. They attended church together on Sundays, took walks around Silver Creek, and shared meals at the hotel dining room or picnics by the river when weather allowed. Their relationship became a subject of gentle teasing and approval in the small community. Mrs. Sullivan claimed credit for her matchmaking, while Dr. Harris remarked that he'd known from the moment Owen carried Catherine into his office that there was something special between them. Catherine found herself falling deeper in love with Owen with each passing day. She loved his quiet strength, his intelligence, his dry humor that emerged more frequently as he grew comfortable with her. She loved his kindness to her students, the way he would listen patiently when one of the children stopped them on the street to proudly recite a newly memorized poem or show off improved handwriting. Most of all, she loved the man he was becoming as he gradually shed the protective shell built during his post-war years. The Owen who had first found her in the desert had been competent and kind but guarded. The Owen who now walked beside her through Silver Creek laughed more easily, shared his thoughts more openly, and looked to the future with hope rather than resignation. For Owen's part, his feelings for Catherine deepened with each encounter. He admired her resilience, her intelligence, and her dedication to her students. He loved watching her teach, her face animated as she explained a difficult concept or praised a child's efforts. He cherished their conversations, whether discussing books they had both read or debating the merits of different teaching methods. Their first real kiss came on a crisp October evening. Owen had taken Catherine to dinner at the hotel, and as they walked back to her cottage, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall. Catherine had tilted her head back, laughing with childlike delight as the delicate flakes landed on her face. Owen had stopped, mesmerized by the sight of her cheeks flushed, eyes bright, snowflakes glistening in her hair. When she looked at him, curious about his sudden stillness, the emotion in his eyes had taken her breath away. "Catherine," he'd said softly, stepping closer, "may I kiss you?" Her answer had been to rise on tiptoe, her hands resting lightly on his chest. Owen had bent his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as years of loneliness dissolved in the connection between them. When they finally separated, both were breathing unevenly, snowflakes continuing to fall around them unnoticed. "I love you," Owen had said simply, the words emerging as naturally as breath. "I think I've loved you since I found you in the desert." "And I love you," Catherine had replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "My rescuer, my friend, my love." Their courtship progressed steadily after that night. Owen began making improvements to Catherine's cottage, fixing a loose floorboard, building shelves for her growing collection of books, installing a proper lock on the door. Each small gesture spoke of his care for her comfort and safety. As winter settled over Silver Creek, Owen's visits became more challenging due to weather and shortened daylight hours. Yet he still managed to see Catherine at least twice a week, sometimes riding through snowstorms to reach her. During one such visit in early December, as they sat before the fire in Catherine's cottage, Owen seemed unusually pensive. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked. Setting aside the essays she had been grading, Owen hesitated, then reached for her hand. "I've been offered a promotion at the ranch. Mr. Miller wants me to become his full partner." "Owen, that's wonderful," Catherine exclaimed. "You deserve it after all your hard work." "It would mean more responsibility," he continued, "but also more security, a better future." He paused, his expression growing serious. "A future I hope to share with you, Catherine." Her heart quickened as she realized where the conversation was heading. "What exactly are you saying, Owen?" In answer, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a delicate gold ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I'm saying that I love you, Catherine Monroe. That finding you in the desert was the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife." Tears filled Catherine's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man before her, the man who had carried her when she couldn't walk, who had believed in her when she had nothing, who had shown her through countless actions, large and small, that love wasn't just about grand passions, but about steady, unwavering support. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Owen Blackwood, I will marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for her hand. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I sent for it from my sister in Ohio. She was keeping it for me." "It's beautiful," Catherine said, admiring how the pearl caught the firelight, "and even more precious knowing it was your mother's." Owen drew her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about his feelings. When they parted, he kept her close, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about our future," he said. "The partnership with Mr. Miller includes land of my own, a parcel about a mile outside of town. There's a small house on it already, nothing fancy, but we could expand it, make it our home." "That sounds perfect," Catherine replied, already envisioning their life together. "Close enough for me to continue teaching, at least until." She trailed off, blushing slightly at the implication. Owen's eyes darkened with understanding and desire. "Until we have children of our own to teach," he finished softly. "I'd like that, Catherine. A family with you." "So would I," she admitted. "Though I'd like to continue teaching for as long as possible. The school is important to me." "Of course," Owen agreed immediately. "I wouldn't want you to give up something you love. We'll make it work." His easy acceptance confirmed what Catherine already knew, that in Owen, she had found not just a husband but a true partner who valued her dreams as much as his own. "When shall we marry?" she asked, practical considerations beginning to surface through her happiness. "As soon as you're willing," Owen replied with a smile. "Though I suppose spring would be more sensible than winter," Catherine nodded. Spring would give us time to prepare properly and for the house to be ready. They spent the rest of the evening planning their future together, the fire casting a warm glow over their shared dreams. When Owen finally left, promising to announce their engagement to Mr. Miller and begin work on the house immediately, Catherine stood at her door watching him ride away, her heart fuller than she had ever thought possible. From near death in the desert to the promise of a life with the man she loved, the journey had been unexpected in every way. Yet as Catherine closed her door against the winter night, the ring on her finger catching the lamplight, she couldn't imagine a more perfect path than the one that had led her to Owen Blackwood. Spring arrived in Silver Creek with a rush of green and a profusion of wildflowers. The snow-covered landscape transformed almost overnight, as if nature herself was hurrying to prepare for the wedding everyone in town was anticipating. Catherine and Owen had set their wedding date for the first Saturday in May, a decision influenced both by the school calendar and by Owen's work schedule at the ranch. The timing proved fortunate, as the day dawned clear and mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and new growth. In the months since their engagement, Owen had worked tirelessly on their future home, transforming the small house on his newly acquired land into a comfortable dwelling worthy of his bride. He had added 2 rooms, installed proper windows, and even built a small covered porch where, he told Catherine, they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. Catherine had continued teaching, her days filled with lessons and her evenings often spent preparing for married life. The women of Silver Creek had been generous with wedding gifts, linens, dishes, cooking utensils, and a beautiful handmade quilt for the marriage bed that made Catherine blush every time she looked at it. On the morning of her wedding day, Catherine awoke in her cottage for the last time as Miss Monroe. By evening, she would be Mrs. Blackwood, mistress of her own home, wife to the man who had saved her life in more ways than one, Mrs. Sullivan arrived early to help with preparations, bringing with her the wedding dress that had been Catherine's most unexpected gift. It had arrived from Denver 3 weeks earlier, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim, accompanied by a note from Owen, "For my bride. Because you deserve beauty on our special day." The dress fit perfectly, emphasizing Catherine's slender figure and bringing out the golden highlights in her brown hair. As Mrs. Sullivan fastened the last button, Catherine hardly recognized the woman in the small mirror, composed, radiant, a far cry from the desperate figure Owen had found in the desert less than a year ago. "You look beautiful, my dear," Mrs. Sullivan said, blinking back tears. "Mr. Blackwood won't know what hit him." "I hope he'll be pleased," Catherine replied, smoothing the silk nervously. "Pleased? The man will be stunned, speechless." Mrs. Sullivan laughed. "Now let's get your hair arranged properly. We want everything to be perfect." By the time they finished, it was nearly noon, the hour set for the ceremony at the church. Mrs. Sullivan departed to take her place among the guests, while Catherine waited for Reverend Caldwell, who had offered to escort her in the absence of any family. When the Reverend arrived, his eyes widened at the sight of her. "My dear Miss Monroe, you are a vision. Mr. Blackwood is a fortunate man indeed." "Thank you, Reverend," Catherine replied, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm the fortunate one." The short walk to the church seemed both endless and too brief. Catherine's heart raced with anticipation, yet she wanted to savor every moment of this day that marked the beginning of her new life. The church was filled to capacity, not just with the people of Silver Creek, but with ranch hands from the Rockingham, and even a few travelers who had decided to delay their journeys to witness the town's most anticipated event of the year. As Catherine paused in the doorway, every head turned, and a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the gathering. But Catherine had eyes only for Owen, who stood at the altar waiting for her. He wore a new black suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. The expression that crossed his features when he saw her was one Catherine would remember for the rest of her life, a mixture of awe, love, and profound gratitude that mirrored her own feelings exactly. The ceremony itself passed in a blur for Catherine. She was conscious of the Reverend's words, of Owen's hand warm and steady in hers, of the weight of the gold band as he slipped it onto her finger beside her engagement ring. But mostly, she was aware of Owen's eyes, holding hers with a promise that went beyond the vows they exchanged. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Caldwell declared at last. "Mr. Blackwood, you may kiss your bride." Owen's kiss was gentle but thorough, drawing another appreciative murmur from the congregation, when they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. For the first time, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration that followed at the hotel was the most lavish Silver Creek had seen in years. Mr. Miller had insisted on providing the finest food and drink, considering it his wedding gift to the couple. Tables groaned under the weight of roast beef, ham, fresh bread, and vegetables from early gardens. A three-tiered cake, created by Mrs. Campbell with assistance from several other ladies, stood proudly in the center of the room. Catherine and Owen moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes from what seemed like the entire population of Silver Creek and its surroundings. Catherine's students presented her with a handmade book of poems and drawings, while the ranch hands gave Owen an ornately tooled saddle they had commissioned from the local leatherworker. As the afternoon wore on, Owen found a moment to draw Catherine aside into a quiet corner away from the festivities. "Are you happy, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. "Completely," she assured him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I keep thinking about that day in the desert, how close I came to not finding you, if I had taken a different route, if I had been an hour later. But you did find me," Catherine reminded him. "And here we are," Owen nodded, his expression solemn. "I promise you, Catherine, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me today." "I could never regret it," she replied softly. "You are everything I never knew I needed, Owen Blackwood." Their moment of privacy was interrupted by Mrs. Sullivan, who announced it was time for the newlyweds to cut the cake. The rest of the celebration passed in a whirl of cake, dancing, and traditional wedding games that left Catherine breathless with laughter and anticipation. As the sun began to set, Owen whispered in Catherine's ear that perhaps it was time they departed for their new home. With knowing smiles and good-natured teasing, their guests formed a pathway to the door, where a buggy decorated with ribbons and flowers awaited them. The short journey to their home was silent, both of them wrapped in thoughts of the life they were beginning together. When they arrived, Owen surprised Catherine by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold, a gesture that reminded them both powerfully of their first meeting. "Walk with me," he had said then. "I'll carry you if I must." Now, as he set her gently on her feet in the center of their home, Owen repeated those words with a smile. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Whatever life brings us, Catherine, we'll face it together. And if you can't walk, I'll carry you." "And I you," she replied, understanding that his words went beyond the physical. "That's what marriage means, isn't it? Supporting each other through whatever comes." Owen's answer was to draw her into his arms, his kiss deepening with a passion they had restrained during their courtship. Catherine responded eagerly, her body pressing against his, all uncertainty vanishing in the heat of their mutual desire. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their marriage bed, Catherine rested her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside their window, the stars shone over Silver Creek, the same stars that had witnessed her desperate journey through the desert and Owen's timely arrival to save her. "I love you, Owen," she whispered, feeling his arms tighten around her in response. "And I love you, Catherine Blackwood," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "Now and always." As sleep claimed them, Catherine's last conscious thought was of gratitude for the journey that had brought her west, for the man whose love had given her a home, and for the promise of all the days and nights they would share together in the life they were building. 5 years later, Catherine stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Owen taught their 4-year-old son James to ride his first pony. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, bringing a smile to Catherine's face even as she kept a careful eye on 2-year-old Sarah, who was playing with wooden blocks at her feet. The years since their wedding had been full ones. The house had grown along with their family, now boasting 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and the covered porch Owen had promised, where they indeed sat many evenings watching the sunset. Catherine had continued teaching until James's birth, then returned part-time when he was old enough for Mrs. Sullivan to mind him during school hours. The arrangement had worked well until Sarah's arrival, when Catherine had reluctantly decided to take a longer break from the classroom. But she hadn't abandoned education entirely. Twice a week, she held reading circles for the women of Silver Creek who wanted to improve their literacy skills. And she had been instrumental in establishing the town's first library, housed in a small building next to the new schoolhouse that had finally been completed 2 years after her arrival. Owen's partnership with Mr. Miller had prospered, allowing them to expand their landholdings and increase the size of their herd. Last year, when the older man had decided to retire to Denver to be near his daughter, he had sold his remaining interest in the ranch to Owen, making him the sole owner of what was now called the Blackwood Ranch. The transition from foreman to owner had been significant for Owen, bringing new responsibilities, but also a deep satisfaction in building something that would one day pass to their children. He still worked as hard as any of his hands, often returning home exhausted but content, ready to share the day's events with Catherine over dinner. Their marriage had deepened with each passing year, the initial attraction and romance maturing into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering commitment. They had weathered challenges together: a severe drought in their second year, the difficult birth of Sarah that had left Catherine bedridden for weeks, the economic downturn that had threatened the ranch's profitability. Through it all, they had kept their promise to support each other, finding strength in their union that neither would have possessed alone. Now, watching Owen's patient instruction as James clutched the pony's mane with determined concentration, Catherine felt a wave of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. This was the life she had never dared imagine when she set out from Philadelphia with nothing but hope and courage: a loving husband, beautiful children, meaningful work, and a community that had become true home. Owen looked up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of quickening her pulse after 5 years of marriage, held the same devotion it had the day he found her barefoot and desperate in the desert. He said something to James, then secured the boy in the saddle before walking toward the porch, his stride as confident and purposeful as ever despite the slight limp he had acquired last winter after a fall from his horse. "How are my girls?" he asked, climbing the steps to join them. He scooped Sarah into his arms, earning a delighted giggle from the toddler whose features so resembled her mother's. "We're fine," Catherine replied, leaning into his side as his free arm encircled her waist. "James looks like a natural horseman." "Takes after his mother," Owen said with a teasing smile. "Stubborn and determined," Catherine laughed. "I believe those are traits he inherited from both of us." They stood together, watching their son's careful circles on the gentle pony. The moment was ordinary yet perfect, a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the life they had built together. "I was thinking," Owen said after a comfortable silence, "about that day I found you, how different our lives would be if I had taken another route." Catherine nodded, understanding his occasional need to revisit the pivotal moment of their meeting. "But you didn't. You found me exactly when I needed finding." "Walk with me," Owen quoted softly, the words that had become a kind of private vow between them. "I'll carry you if I must." "And you did," Catherine replied, turning to face him, "just as I've carried you when you needed it." Owen's expression softened as he looked at her, this woman who had brought such unexpected joy into his life. "Best bargain I ever made," he said simply. Catherine rose on tiptoe to kiss him, still mindful of Sarah watching with curious eyes from her father's arms. "I love you, Owen Blackwood, and I love you, Catherine Blackwood, now and always." As they turned their attention back to James, who was now proudly sitting straighter in the saddle, Catherine reflected that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginning, led exactly where they were meant to. Her path had led her to this man, these children, this life that exceeded her wildest dreams, from barefoot and desperate in the desert to beloved wife, mother, and valued community member. It was a transformation that still amazed her. But perhaps the greater transformation had been Owen's, from the solitary, wounded man who had found her that day to the loving husband and father who stood beside her now, his heart fully engaged in the life they shared. "Walk with me," he had said. And they had walked together ever since, sometimes carrying each other, always supporting each other, building a life neither had imagined possible before their paths crossed in the vast New Mexico desert. It was, Catherine thought as she leaned against her husband's solid strength, the greatest blessing of her life, not just to be found when she was lost, but to be truly seen, valued, and loved by the man who had found her.